So, did I just get back from a little brief vacation in the United States, going down to Glacier National Park? Yes, I did. Did I spend too much money there? Probably. But did I let that stop me from going to a collectible show here in Calgary today? No, I did not. Of course, I had to go, and luckily I didn't spend too much money. The things I bought were because they were stupid cheap, like this Cthulhu statue here from the H.P. Lovecraft Historical Society. Someone was selling that for 20 bucks. This is number 41 of 50, incidentally, so I'm glad to get that. If you're not familiar, it's from the H.P. Lovecraft Historical Society's Call of Cthulhu movie, which is a wonderful movie. It's a retro silent movie thing. I'll probably do a video about it someday, but I managed to get that. Also picked up small additions to my small Transformer collection, which I will probably do a video about as well. But the main thing that I want to talk about here is something I found for a ridiculously low price of $20, which is Canadian, which is like unheard of for a G.I. Joe classified figure. This is going to be my first G.I. Joe classified figure, hopefully only, unless people give them to me as presents. Because I've been watching the G.I. Joe Classified, but not pulling the trigger on buying one. But there was one figure that I kind of wanted, if I could find him cheap, and I did find him cheap. In fact, right from the mailer, and that is, oh, there we go, Sergeant Slaughter, the professional wrestler turned live action G.I. Joe character. He's the one that I had considered getting. And why did I consider getting Sergeant Slaughter of all G.I. Joes? Is it because he was my favorite G.I. Joe? Well, not exactly. My favorite Joes were Snake Eyes, of course, and Flint, actually, were my favorites. And then slightly lesser Lady J as well. Those are sort of my big three, I would say, for favorite G.I. Joes. But Sergeant Slaughter is a different situation because he's an actual person, right? The professional wrestler, Sergeant Slaughter. And that's what I mainly knew him from. Because as a child in the 1980s, growing up in Calgary especially, home of the Hart family, I was into professional wrestling. WWF at the time, Hulkamania, the Rock and Wrestling Connection. You know, people today complain about, oh, professional wrestling is like turned into this total cartoon with AEW and Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks and everything else. And it's like, dude, in the 80s, wrestling literally was a cartoon. There was literally a cartoon of Hulk Hogan's Rock and Wrestling. And Captain Lou Albano as the original voice of Mario. Like, to me, that's Mario.
Oh, Luigi, it's not Rowdy Roddy Piper. It's some hairy lady with the plant dress.
Now that's a mistake most people make just once. My name is Rowdy Roddy Piper, and I want my bagpipes.
That, to me, that's Mario, is Captain Lou Albano. And Sergeant Slaughter, being the live-action spokesperson for G.I. Joe, they made an action figure of him and put him in the cartoon as well. And so, to me, this is like peak 80s here. And that's why I wanted this figure, is that you had G.I. Joe. So I did collect G.I. Joe as a kid. That was one of my top toy lines. I mean, really, I could talk about the 80s as a whole other thing. But for me, I mean, I loved pretty much everything in the 80s, right? If it had a cartoon, I was on it. whether that's DuckTales and Chippendales Rescue Rangers, whether that's Transformers and G.I. Joe. Gem, I was a Gem fan as a young boy. Suffice to say, I liked everything, whether it was supposed to be for boys or girls or whatever. If it came out, I liked it. But there were certain things I liked more than other things. Transformers was the top of the pile. G.I. Joe as well. Captain Power and the Soldiers of the Future was another one. Real Ghostbusters, even more so than the movie, but like Real Ghostbusters was my Ghostbusters in a lot of ways. So those were some of my big ones. But I've never got into collecting like the G.I. Joe classified series for reasons that I'll probably talk about in a little bit here. But to have a G.I. Joe figure who also represents the 1980s era of wrestling that I grew up with, the golden age of wrestling, which incidentally I do still watch pro wrestling today. I don't watch WWE because it doesn't work for me. What I mostly watch now is All Elite Wrestling, and I keep tabs on New Japan as well. And I love it, and I love the Elite. Sorry if you don't, but I don't buy the secondhand opinion. Kenny Omega, the Young Bucks, Orange Cassidy, they're all fantastic. And too bad if you don't agree. Yeah, so 1980s, the 80s era, golden age of WWF, of G.I. Joe, of those cartoons, and that's all boxed up here with the Sarge. So listen up.
You scums! You slimes! You maggots!
We're gonna open this guy up and have a look at the actual figure when he comes up with it. I'm stoked for this because also I know what's in here, and one of the things that's in here is really what made me want to pull the trigger on him as well. Made me want this figure, even not just that it's Sarge, but it's one of the accessories he comes with. So let's crack him open and have a look.
It takes something more than just special to be part of this team. I should know. I trained them. Courage, strength, sacrifice. That's what being a hero is all about. And watch the greatest hero that ever fought for freedom.
And here he is. Here is the Sarge out of the box and looks amazing. And this is the thing I was talking about, the accessory. Well, I mean, his other accessories, okay. He's got his little rifle here. He's got a full set of hands, identical hands for each arm, so that you can do like any set of poses. Or you can do the point, you can do his claw hand there. Basically, any of the poses that you see on the box, you can do with his hands there. He's got his I always forget the name of these things, like the riding crop sort of thing. I know the name. I knew what it was. I've forgotten the name since. Comes with his whistle here because his main role in G.I. Joe is as the drill sergeant. His hat is removable, but it stays on really well, as you probably just saw with me struggling there. And he has the aviator sunglasses as well, which is perfect. You need that for the Sarge there, Sergeant Slaughter. But the accessory that really sold it for me, which I love, is he comes with the little version of himself. So it's like, this isn't even just like, Sergeant Slaughter as a G.I. Joe character, professional wrestler turned G.I. Joe, but also you can recreate the commercial of him holding his own action figure, trying to sell it to you. And let me just try and adjust this here. See if I can get that to, there we go. Boxed on an original G.I. Joe card. This is the best thing. And it actually does open up. You can slide him out. He's got the full thing there, but I'm not going to do that. I don't want to lose him, and I don't want to mess up the little packaging he comes with. So this is the best part, is that he comes with the little thing. So you can actually have an action figure of Sergeant Slaughter, the wrestler, being the live action mascot for G.I. Joe. That's what I wanted this figure for. This is like the best thing again, because it's all, for me, this figure is all about capturing that period of the 1980s when I grew up in there with being a kid into GI Joe and into professional wrestling, with Sergeant Slaughter. Neither my favorite wrestler nor my favorite GI Joe, although he was certainly up there. um, I mean, I was all about, Hulk Hogan as a child. um, and then locally, Stampede Wrestling as well. Like I grew up I'm Calgarian. I grew up in Calgary, and so I grew up with Stampede Wrestling with Owen Hart and Brian Pillman, both of whom I met as a child.
This is the main event for the North American heavyweight title. The challenger, Mucka Toilet Bowl Singh. The champion, Owen Hart at 223.
Also met Stu Hart and several other Harts. And one time, Bret Hart was riding his bike past me on our pathway system here in Calgary. I had to do a double take. Like, wait a second, was that who I thought it was? So I would say, yeah, Sergeant Slaughter, neither one of my favorite wrestlers, nor one of my favorite G.I. Joes. But you combine Sergeant Slaughter as pro wrestler turned live action G.I. Joe, and that's the gold. That's the gold. That's why I wanted this figure. And he looks like himself. And this is the one case where I'm actually like totally cool with him looking like how he's supposed to look, because he's representing a real person. When the G.I. Joe Classified line started, I actually liked that they had updated the characters. I liked the new look for Duke and Scarlet and so on. I liked that they kind of Fortnited them and made them updated them for the Fortnite generation. I liked that. I like good updates and revamps of characters. I actually don't mind it. I'm not intrinsically against it. I just don't like bad ones. So I liked the sort of the Fortniting of the G.I. Joe characters. And that's why I never pulled the trigger on buying them, but I did like them, and I paid attention to what was coming out in Classified. But I guess that's it, right? I didn't buy them. So Hasbro went where the money was, which is with the people who wanted the exact same G.I. Joe character they had as a kid, but now in the larger and more expensive scale. Which to me defeats the point, because if you have the figures, or you can find the original G.I. Joe figure, then just get that one, I guess. I like them a little updated, and if you can do it with the higher detail and the more realistic looking weapons or whatever, then just make the character themselves look better. Because you have to admit, some G.I. Joes are pretty ridiculous. Right? My favorite Cobra is the Crimson Guard. That's another one where it's like, don't touch that uniform. That uniform is fantastic. But if I was in charge of the line, I would have redesigned Tomax and Zaymot, the Crimson Guard commanders, to look cooler, have not so much the 80s outfit, but have more of like a proper Crimson Guard sort of uniform. Dr. Mindbender looks ridiculous. I would have redesigned him to look more like a mad scientist than like a bodybuilder with his suspenders and whatever. But all of that said, Sergeant Slaughter looks absolutely perfect, right? He looks like himself as the actual wrestler who was the spokesperson for G.I. Joe. Articulation, like it matters, but he's got the double hinged elbow. He's got the multiple hands. He's got this sort of weird shoulder hinge. He looks a little bit hunchbacked with the way they've got his posture there. I guess you can move his neck a bit, but yeah. There's his action figure. We'll just prop that right there. Swivel, the whatever, blah, blah, blah. He's got kind of the O-ring. He's got that weird bend at there, which I don't really like. I like how NECA does that joint there better than I like how Classified does that joint, because it's just sort of really obvious, like, a joint there. And as we know, I don't like my figures looking very jointy. So, knees, I'm finding, though, are a bit tight on this figure, so I'm not going to really fuss with him too much. But that's fine, because he's not meant... For me, I'm not getting him for an action pose. I'm getting him so that he can hold his action figure and tell you that you're supposed to buy it. Whether that's bugging mom and dad at the store or cashing in your flag points to get your Sergeant Slaughter figure. So buy the toy right there. And I guess those commercials worked because I did eventually get my Sergeant Slaughter GI Joe figure. And yeah, this is great. I love this. And I guess all that's really left now is taking funny photos with them, right? That's how it works around here. So there's G.I. Joe Classified, my only classified figure, probably the only one I'm going to buy, um, because of all of the different layers that he represents for me. Of being a kid in the 80s, watching G.I. Joe, watching WWF, and seeing this crossover with the live action G.I. Joe character of Sergeant Slaughter.